Welcome to the Talent Equation Podcast. If you are passionate about helping young people to unleash their potential and want to find ways to do that better, then you've come to the right place. The Talent Equation Podcast seeks to answer the important questions facing parents, coaches, and talent developers as they try to help young people become the best they can be. This is a series of unscripted, unpolished conversations between people at the razor's edge of the talent community who are prepared to share their knowledge, experiences, and challenges in an effort to help others get better faster. Listen, reflect, and don't forget to join the discussion at thetalentequation.co.uk. Enjoy the show.
Well, hello there, and welcome to a little bit of a different podcast recording. This week, I've invited a load of people who've been on the podcast over the last year or so, 80-odd episodes I think I'm at now, and just said, hey, come and join me. Let's have almost like a Christmas drinks party without the drinks, and actually we're not face to face because we're on the internet. And very kindly, a number of them said, yeah, I'll join you for that. We'll have a little bit of a chinwag about what's been going on in our year and any reflections or key takeaways or learnings we've got. So I give you the cast of the Talent Equation joining me for Christmas drinks. I hope you enjoy.
Sorry that I'm rushing an early start. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to go a little earlier than expected, but I'll try and get back on again later. It's like I'm going in for early drinks and then heading away and coming back again.
Hey, not for the first time, hey?
No. Yeah. This is a great idea. Absolutely fantastic idea. It's great to. I see all the guys that you've got on. It'll prove to be a fascinating chat, no doubt. What's up with you?
Hurtling towards Christmas with. Yeah. I feel like I'm riding the back of a comet. Just waiting to see which asteroid I crash into. But yeah, no, it's fun. I tell you, there's some fun stuff happening. Yeah. But what about you then? So I mean, you've got lots of highlights of the year, I imagine, but I'm just wondering whether, what's your 2018 highlight?
Yeah, I mean, I saw you putting that into the group just about, what's that, is there a takeaway or is there a key thing? And it got me thinking, and I was, like anything, as you know, like there's a really nice network of us all who connect every so often and reach out every so often when there's a problem, when you're like, oh my gosh, I'm struggling with this, can you help? And it's always good to have someone on the other end of the phone who just, I've experienced that before and it's horrible, and but I suppose the one thing that consistently came up through the year with all the kind of different chats and stuff was patience. For anyone, and I know the space that you're in, and I'm not in the kind of development space any longer, and I feel it can kind of have a negative effect on you if you're not in that kind of that space where it is development of the child and of their the roundedness of an individual, let's say, because it's such a rich space and it's such a great proving ground for good coaching, but I suppose what I found over the last year is that idea of patience is such a premium that that even more so, like, the kind of space that I'm in that kind of performance space, or where it's livelihoods and things are at stake, let's say. I've myself seen even more so than ever that if you want to get someone there quicker, then encourage them to be more patient. I know that's a paradox, but it's almost like slow down, you'll go faster. And I think a lot of that has kind of come out of a lot of the reflections over the year around that space of so many people feeding into this space, and a lot of the guys that you've had on, even just the one I I'm actually in the middle of one of your podcasts at the moment, but the last one I was on was the guy, McNeil.
Oh, Scott, yeah.
Like, there's so much stuff in that. So much stuff, but it's so much of it came back down to get away from thinking linearly for anyone's progression. And if you can do anything at all for anyone, it is be the coach that gives them time and space to figure stuff out.
Absolutely.
Be that coach, be that guy or girl who when they reflect back on their career was like, you know what? She was the coach that actually gave me the space to actually find myself, that set me free, that set me on a real, a genuine exploration of where I fit into this whole thing as an athlete. And it's funny, as I said, when you threw that into the group there the other day, I went back over, my own kind of notes, and at the end of every month, I kind of tray here on my desk. I'll get on a call with someone and I'll have notes, and I'll just chuck it into the tray, And before the next month starts, I'm going to go through those notes and be like, okay, what were the kind of takeaways? And it was amazing how many times I had, in many different ways, written the word patience down, and I'd have a patience written down in block letters with it in bold loads of different times. I've gone over it. Like on one talk, I must have written the word down on the same space 8 or 9 times because it was so drilled into the page,
Yeah.
I've it written down, and the way as you're chatting, you might doodle again. It's underlined and it's circled, and it just came up a huge amount of time this year. A huge amount of time. Just that idea of almost be a time architect. Can you become that coach that affords the athletes that you are working with time, that when they're with you, that they feel they have time on their hands, as opposed to a lot of the things I would hear from athletes is this pressure of having to get there yesterday.
Yeah. And
it kind of takes me back to that, as I said, what I said at the start, to try and encourage more patience, because you'll actually get there.
It's funny, though, that I think even in the developmental space, everybody's in a rush. So I've been working with a few organizations of late, and one of the things that I think has been really interesting that I've been reflecting on is how, if you want coaches to operate in this way and, work in this very much more emergent, kind of development at the speed at which development should happen, which is we believe should be richer and deeper, then you've got to design your curriculum in the same way.
Yeah.
And that's the piece of work that hockey have done and others are doing. But you've still got quite a lot of linear curricula in place, athlete development curricula, which are basically saying, by this age, you should be here. And if you're not here, either you are defective as an individual, and therefore we will remove you from the system and bring somebody else in who matches the expected progression rate, or we make some sort of huge conclusion that the coach is somehow defective because they haven't been able to get this group of individuals up to this particular point in time. And both of those things are crazy. But you can kind of understand that when you have somebody working with a linear curriculum, trying to work in a non-linear way, that those two things are going to culturally clash all the time.
Yeah, and I was in Sheffield on Wednesday. 8 of us went over from the department here in CIT to the Keith David's Skill Acquisition Symposium, because Rick done his live the day before with Duarte, and they put on a day, of all the guys, and Joe Stone presented, and Martin Rothwell presented, and Ben Strafford presented, Emma Anderson presented. They had all their kind of post-grads, and then, of course, Keith and Rick and Duarte, who were not obviously post-grads, presenting work and whatever. And it was just a really cool day of people putting stuff out there for other people to say, can I just poke and prod that a little bit, but the standout lab essentially, where there's live subjects being put through a completely new model, is Mark's work up in AIK Stockholm.
Yeah.
It's quite literally groundbreaking what they're managing to get through. And I was actually on the phone to him last night, and he was even saying again, he was like, yeah, he said, and yet we still have a lot of challenges.
Mm.
They are light years ahead of a lot of other sports and a lot of other countries and what they're doing in their own club. And yet he still has a lot of challenges. So that kind of makes you think, what measure of challenge are some people experiencing if a club like AIK Stockholm, who now have huge backing from a media perspective and a government perspective, and even the social constructs around their space in the community, and the parents and the coaches, and if they're still having trouble and difficulties with coaches saying, well, no, I want to do speed today, and it's going to be done in this exact way, and everyone's form and technique. What hope is there almost for others? Because like their model is incredible what they've managed to get done, and they're only at the tip of the iceberg. He'll be the first to say we're only starting. But speaking of curriculum, if you hear Mark talking about how they are rewriting the documents for their club, he said they are very particular about removing key words and phrases to take it out of there. The word product, this product of our system, it's gone. Talent, it's gone. Elite, it's gone. So that maybe there are people who are already infected by these terms. But you know what? Anyone who picks up this manual next year, well, they're not going to see any sight or sound of these words. And we've got to start somewhere, It is a living, breathing experiment, essentially, and it's brilliant to see that they've taken that leap and right across the board, how he talked about connecting the parents into this, form of life that they discuss, and that they're doing, all the work they're doing, like Martin Rothwell's work in rugby league around this space, and it's very promising in a lot of ways, because you're like, wow, this is going to be so cool to watch. But then you rock up to your own kids' kind of training, and where you're just kind of joining on in as the dad, and I'm here to help, and you realize this is we're still a long way from ever getting to even having a conversation that might lead to one day something like AIK Stockholm, and that'll give you an idea how far away we are,
It's I don't know if he told you though, I was over there not long ago, and I got to be in a room with a load of people from the Swedish Sports Confederation, and Mark's two colleagues, Dennis Hortin and James Vaughan, presented some of the early findings that they've had from the research methodology that they've been using to kind of, I guess, test and track how like the kind of cultural attitudes are embedding within the players, within the coaches, within the parents. They're using this tool called SenseMaker.
Yes.
Come out a banger. And working with the guys Al Smith and Mark Upton and John O'Byrne, who've got this social enterprise called My Fastest Mile. And I actually think it's a really interesting area, that, because given the limitations of some of the research methods that we often are challenged by when working in this ecological way, they're essentially using this almost like live tracking to track the lived experiences of the participants. And that's really interesting and aligns, I think, very closely to the approach that you're trying to use. But just some of the stuff they shared around some of the kind of challenges in terms of the older people involved in the program and their experiences and how this has clashed against their current experiences or previous experiences. It's really interesting.
It is. And he made a comment there in Sheffield on Wednesday about how sometimes it's the parent coaches, the volunteer coaches who have no coaching experience, who catch on to the constraints-led approach or this non-linear methodology quicker. because they're not coming with any bias. They're not coming with any sense of, well, it should be this way. And all of a sudden, then when you start from scratch with them he was saying, just they get so excited about it that it's not regimented. It's not incredibly structured that if I don't do this, I'm actually doing something wrong. It's actually, no. Just be with them. Be at one with what's happening in front of you, and then see if you can just, manipulate it one way or the other to determine if you feel, okay, this isn't working. Will we go a little bit more here or not? No, that didn't work. A little bit back here. Great. And he said, you can see at times that the parent coaches get it quicker. And there's got to be, for me, there's something in that there's no, and again, it's probably because of my own experiences, how I once coached, and I remembering that very resistant and almost painful transition into how I now coach. But if I never had that, then there wouldn't have been that painful transition, but I was trying to hold on to something that I'd seen. Surely the coaching badges and all those different things that I'd done, and surely there is. I have the badge, don't I? That must stand for something, and I have the file that tells me how to do it. That must stand for something, and I can see how that tug of war is at play, and that's the trick. That's the tricky thing, But then again, like you were saying, I think we even said about it. Said it when we were chatting the last time. There's so many. There seems to be a very large number of people quickly coming into this space. It doesn't be, there's a lot of good people feeding into this space now. So I think we're almost closing in on that critical mass or a tipping point of where there'll be enough people to be able to have, strong conversations with someone who will come with something to say, no, that there's no evidence behind this, and it's all conjecture, and we're coming. I think there's an emerging, almost like a scene from Lord of the Rings. It's just this huge mass of people running towards something, and I think if we can just have a little have that kind of face off one day.
It's interesting because
with enough people, who revolution will be televised, as they say.
It's interesting because I was at was with Oxford Brookes the other day doing a seminar, and one of your colleagues in the world of academia, very well published, very highly regarded, described constraints-led approach as pseudoscience.
Yeah, I saw that.
So we didn't bite, but it was interesting just to hear that, and circular arguments, I think the other phrase was used to describe it.
Which I'd love
to, what I'd love to do, and I think I'm gonna, here's a commitment for you for the new year. I'm going to set up a kind of intelligence squared Oxford style debate somehow between almost like, kind of two ecological practitioners or two ecological academics and two, I don't know, cog-psych academics or, anti-ecological.
Yeah.
And let's kind of, do it properly, structure it so it's not just a free for all, and then, kind of have that sort of discussion in front of a live studio audience almost. I don't know if I can, even if that's physical, but I think there's got to be some room for that.
Absolutely. Well, look, and there's, there are others, like, and again, they're important. It's all important to feed the narratives, because the narrative, the more of that there's going on, the better the narrative will become. To block it, I do think sometimes it can get a little dismissive, even to the point of maybe aggressive sometimes. But again, great. Let's have what do they? It's normally a dance off. So the equivalent of the Michael Jackson down in the car park with the two what was that, Thriller was it or something, or Beat It?
Yeah.
Let's do it, and I'll be in the audience that night if you put that together. We might even have it like a wedding. Are you with the groom or the bride, and whichever side you go down. And
well, what I'd be keen to do is to make it work so that it was you had the academics going at it, and then you had a sort of equivalent one, but it's practitioner led.
Yeah.
And see what people say. Rusty, you're here. How are you?
You're right.
Looking very relaxed, chilled out.
My new lifestyle.
Is this your new lifestyle?
Yeah, it's pretty cool, if I'm honest.
You're catching sort of towards the end because Ed's unfortunately got to dip off, but it's good to see you. And we've just been reflecting on the past year and the way Ed's particularly talking about the way that it feels like there's more and more people coming into the coaching space wanting to have a really decent dialogue about coaching approaches that are not what we would call traditional, linear, structured, ordered, all those sorts of things. It feels like there's a real kind of movement. I don't know whether you've picked up on the same vibe.
Maybe that's just our world. Maybe that's our biases.
We're in an echo chamber, aren't we?
A vacuum. I have a confession here, Rusty. We've never met, but I know all about you. And just to let you know, I have the cards, the Magic Academy cards on my Santa list.
Wow,
So thanks, because I was struggling. What can I ask Santa at 45 years of age? And I have that and the Non-Perfect Dad book. In fact, they're my two stocking fillers this year. So.
Non-Perfect Dad book, here it is.
Yeah.
There it is.
So that's on its way to me. I've sent my letter was posted there to the North Pole the other day. So thanks.
Yeah, well, good. Yeah, well, I'm enjoying lots of the stuff you're doing. We're coming over to Ireland actually at some stage in
great.
In the new year. We've been speaking to a couple of people, Martin McKeeran, who used to be at Newcastle Falcons, and Budge Pountney about coming over. So.
Okay, great. Well, get in touch, please.
I guess in answer to your question, Stuart, more people I think more people have had their world kind of perturbed a little bit, so they're thinking, is coaching this?
Right.
Well, I'm definitely getting more people asking questions. Now, whether or not they want to listen to what I say, I don't know. But I'm definitely getting more people that are curious. And that's great. It's also quite scary for some of them. So I was in Holland last night, and when you actually start to talk about the fact you've got 30 kids and, we're shaping each other's brains, and that's quite a big responsibility. And you don't know, there's a new kid at the session in Holland last night, and, it's his first ever session, and no one knows his background or where he's from, or, then suddenly coaching sounds quite complicated. I guess maybe just be quite nice to people, and it's a reasonable start.
That sounds so difficult, though.
To be nice to people. So yeah, I'm enjoying the fact that more people are curious. I mean, before that, we just kind of got on with it, didn't we? And just accepted that whatever we were told was whatever we were told. I think it's exciting. There's lots of information out there, and lots of the thing that, the most powerful thing I've seen with social media is someone like Dave Lottie this year. So Dave posts on Twitter, any chance of coming into other people's environments, and he gets 35 invites in 24 hours. So he's in football teams, he's in... So that's the bit I think that's changed, is that more and more people are going, we can go and hang out together. And we don't have to be from the same sport. We don't have to be coaching under 14s. Actually, I could learn some stuff in other spaces. So I think for me, that's the stuff that's exciting. And it's exciting that people are now driving it. So I think lots of NGBs, and I know how much you love NGBs, Stuart, lots of NGBs need to just be more comfortable with the fact that they don't have to be organising it.
Yeah. I think again, back to another one of your podcasts, it was with David Hinchcliffe, was it?
Yeah.
And he was talking about just even how if you just question things long enough, even how they use video, well, you're going to uncover better ways of kind of doing things, you know.
Yeah. Nick Levett's just arrived. Welcome, Nick.
It was the first thought of seeing Rusty spread out that just, it made me feel slightly erotic and turned on at that moment. It was a really strong start.
See, weirdly, I had the reverse response to that. I can
Nick's aiming nice as he was doing his hair.
No, we're just in big reflection mode, Nick, talking about it feels like there's a growing interest, curiosity, desire to find out more, learn more, see more different things, explore in different spaces, come outside of the sport bubble, go into a different sport bubble. Off the back of your conference in Ireland, one of the attendees who found himself sat between myself and Mark O'Sullivan, he sort of looked either side and went, what am I doing here? Guy Darky, he's based down in Henley. He's a great guy. He followed up and came up and watched me coach my under-12s. I don't know what he learned from it, but he got right involved, got stuck in. I was experimenting with a new game that night, and we sort of just worked it through and had a chat afterwards, and he sent me through some notes and his reflections and sort of what he observed, and I'm like, really? You observed all that? But yeah, it was great.
That is great. And a bit like that, the fallout, in one sense, or the aftermath of that event was just how it impacted on our local area. The amount of guys just kind of locally that you're almost not even aware of that are kind of coming out of the woodwork saying, I've been trying to work in this space. It was great to actually go and see that many people there who are actually all trying to do the same thing, all with the same problems, and it's been like that. It just, as I said to you, I think for some of the guys come on, there's plenty of people out there who are trying to just get outside their comfort zone, and they can do that even more so when they realize that there's other people who are happy to get outside their comfort zone.
Mm. So, Rusty, we haven't really got onto yours. Did you actually have a little bit of? Did you get a chance to have a bit of a think about what your kind of key learning or takeaway? It's been quite a tumultuous year, a year of transformation for you, moving from one sport to another and moving into the whole, the academy with Fletch. You're obviously on your grand tour. I'd be interested just to get your takeaways from the year, I suppose.
I thought about two things. I thought about one. It's really exhausting working with someone who's not like you. And having to pretend. I don't think it's good for your well-being.
But you've worked for the RFU for years. You've worked with all the people who aren't like you.
Yeah, I'm not sure I did to that extent. If someone's the polar opposite of you, then it's not good for your well-being or your health. So I feel liberated. The second one, and this is, I randomly went to Holland. A lady from a magazine emailed me and said, would you come over? And there wasn't really a plan. I actually ended up doing a bit of coaching. But when we arrived, we went to an artist's studio. This guy is an internet entrepreneur who's now decided he wants to be an artist. And we sat around what was essentially a kids' tea party table with drinks ranging from champagne to Yakults, food ranging from carpaccio to peanut butter, and with no plan other than just to debate around some questions. So one of the questions was, winning and losing is for games, not for conflict. And then another one was talk about how the word accountability makes you feel. And so we just had this really, there's a guy from business, there's me, there was another rugby coach, someone from a magazine, and this artist guy. And my biggest reflection was, and I just need to spend more time doing stuff like that where there's no agenda, I'm not getting paid for action, and I'm just going on a bit of a, I just have a time to think differently about stuff.
Yeah.
I came up with one idea that I can't share, but I spoke to Fletch about it yesterday, and he's just like, why have we never, ever thought of that? And it was worth the trip just for one idea that's made a big difference to the stuff we'll do. So probably just do more of that type of stuff, if I'm honest. I do a bit of that, but very rarely where there is literally, I have no idea what's going to happen in this day. There's no agenda. There's no, probably just escape a bit more.
And that, I would say that that's one of the things that you try and do with some of the learning environments that you're trying to create for coaches. You basically go, you do try and deliberately keep the space open for lots and lots of different routes for the discussion to go down. There's some similarities there, is there not?
Yeah, but I'm doing the organising there. Probably need to, that was, and also just probably to put more time aside for myself, because it can be quite tiring, coaching and supporting other people and all that type of stuff. So it was just quite nice to escape, really.
Ed, I also thought that about the conference that you guys ran. I mean, I know there was an element of a flow and there was a bit of an agenda, because obviously we needed to try and keep people on some kind of a journey, and we couldn't make it. But what was brilliant was the space in between where the dialogue could happen and the conversation could happen, and keeping that pretty flowing and loose, and how valuable that was.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, because Ollie, Phil, Alan and myself got on a call yesterday just to kind of start the early chats about the next one. We're that difficult second album, as they call it. We're going to do every second year to give a little bit of time between each one. So we're kind of looking again, probably maybe the same month in 2020, April 2020. But the one thing that we were saying is that the interaction is what was really critical. But to kind of go to Rusty's point about just that no plan element, as I know you're aware of, Stu, like the venue changed literally the day before. We had organised and planned for a completely different type of venue, which eventually just became the tea and coffee room. And we moved into the other space, and it was your classic kind of needing to be adaptable, because everything got completely thrown in the air about 36 hours before the first people arrived to register. And it actually was the making of it, because I don't think there would have been the same interaction between people if we had stayed in the other space. And also as a result of the bedlam, the chaos of having to change everything, it totally got us in a much better headspace. It almost relaxed us, the fact that we were kind of, what? Oh my, we're never going to get this ready, and there's too much. And it actually was the right headspace for us to be in, as opposed to, we're all perfectly organized, this is going to go swimmingly well, and we're ready a whole day in advance of anyone arriving. And of course, when you plan anything to that extent, well, you probably overthought it, and you're actually not ready for something to emerge organically or anything else. And a lot of what you experienced, Stu, and the others there was things that just happened as a result of a major change 36 hours out from people arriving. And as you said, probably the most significant feedback we got was there was just a huge amount of interaction between people. The talks, the presentations, of course, you make sure you stack that well for if you're putting on an event. But it's all the other stuff around it, when it's just free flowing and freestyling. Even the way Phil organized the poster stuff, we couldn't believe the kind of feedback we got about that, because it was almost like an open mic session. We had not planned for that. We had not planned for that. We were going, because we'd never organized something like this as a group before. So we'd all been just going on our own experiences at conferences where we were either delegates or presenters. And we'd never seen it like the way that Phil had come up with. And it turned out to be one of the most commented things in our feedback. Just the interaction around posters was just a really, relaxed and chilled out kind of way of doing it. But people came away with, I actually got what that poster was, as opposed to the norm that you experience. So not a lot of that was planned, and yet it kind of was planned, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, there's a whole thing there that it relates, I think, to a little bit around coaching and any or the design of any learning environment, which is if it's overly planned, overly structured, what you're going to lose then is the opportunity for exploration, creativity, and novelty.
Yeah.
And things to take place there that you would not there to expect. Now, that's not to say that there can't be any planning.
Yeah.
You know, we need some idea or some structure, or actually you can be on a continuum, can't you? Because actually, if you're going in there, you know, you hear about these ideas of like unconferences, which are completely self-directed, completely led by the group in terms of the conversation on the day. Nick and I actually attended one run by the guys at My Fastest Mile, and it was disconcerting because sometimes you can go into that scenario, you've traveled miles and you're not going to get what you wanted to get out of it. So it can be a bit of a challenge. So you need a bit of a balance, but it's where you place that balance in the design of that learning space that still enables that kind of discovery, exploration to take place.
Are you saying it depends, Stuart? Is that what you're saying?
Saying again? What?
I'm saying it depends.
He's definitely not saying that.
I'm definitely not saying it depends. I'm definitely saying that it's just nuanced. Should we say that?
I think it's a bit like a conference is like a meeting. We have lots of expectations around tradition and what it looks like. And so why do people have to be sat down in a meeting? Why does it have to be an agenda? Why does it have to last exactly an hour? Why isn't it based around questions? Why do all the people have to be in the same room for the meeting? You know, lots of stuff around conferences that would freak out a lot of people. And I like it. I mean, if you're going to start talking about, you know, a world that's non-linear, how are you going to talk about it in a linear conference? That'll be my question.
Well, even on that, let's say you go back to. I got a phone. Nick Winkelman opened our conference. So he's the head of athletic science and performance for the IRFU. And he called me, I don't know, it was 35 minutes before the conference. He was like, Ed, I'm about an hour out from you. There's crazy traffic. There's been an accident. And I was like, okay. There's nothing you can, you know. And we said, okay, well, look, do what you can. We might just move something. And you kind of turned to the guys and said, yeah, Nick's going to be a little late. And again, and if any of you know Nick, that's the last thing you would have that you'd expect from him. He's so organized. He's incredibly professional. And so I was like, so look, we didn't expect, you certainly didn't expect this kind of thing. So we're saying, look, well, we might just move this around maybe then. And I don't know. And all of a sudden, about, I'd say 90 seconds before we were about to say, okay, we're actually going to change things around, Nick comes through the door. Now, I don't know how he covered an hour's worth of driving in 30 odd minutes. And it changed even, he said himself, it changed even the energy from him because he was wired for his discussion then, like, and his practical, you know, and it was incredible. And it was a brilliant way to open it. And maybe that wouldn't have been as energized if he didn't drive like Lewis Hamilton down from Dublin to Cork and using roundabouts, the chicanes and the like, you know.
Kept to the speed limit though, didn't he, Ed? He didn't break the speed limit at any stage.
No, not at all. And in fact, when he called me on the telephone, he pulled in at that time. He pulled in, yeah. It was at a rest stop, in fact. Stu, I just seen the time. I'm gonna have to go, and I'll see if I can get back on later on. Okay, when I'm wrapped up here.
No worries. Cheers, Ed.
Good to see you guys.
Have a good one. Have a good break if we don't chat to you later.
Bye.
So, Nick, you've had a tumultuous year. You must have plenty of takeaways.
No comment.
You signed a non-disclosure, did you?
No, well, the beauty of it is that I didn't. Because as they were opening the door for me, they weren't in a position to make me do anything. But no, I have kept counsel on many views.
having said that, I can imagine there are some interesting reflections. You don't necessarily have to go into detail, but I imagine you've got some interesting reflections on this year.
Yeah, I guess, comparing organisations is an interesting thing.
Okay.
And your expectations, and coming from a very big bureaucratic organisation with a certain set of enforced values, not necessarily ones that the staff had decided themselves, to a place now where for the current set that we now have, we've all had input into, it even just makes you think differently about the place that you work. And I don't think one's better or worse. I just think they're different. And the values that we certainly have now are about being something. They're not just words on a bit of paper. They're be empathetic and be respectful. So it's about a way of behaving, and it's really interesting now because the organisation, we talk a lot now about great coaching being about people, and it is just about people. Whether you have a name of an organisation above you, or you have a certain kind of way of making decisions. I reflect back now at my 14 years at the FA. The FA is a great organisation with a lot of great people in, but sometimes you get a bad person, and that becomes the challenge. And I think when I look at then a lot of sporting pathways, and I now work across a lot of different sports pathways, I think if you've got good people that all want to achieve good stuff, then amazing things can happen. But if there's one person in there that becomes the blocker, then you have a challenge. So I kind of look back and think now that, if you could find your way around that blocker, and certainly when I look at different sports, if you've got great people getting into decision-making positions, then I think some pretty cool stuff can happen. And it's about making sure that we can influence systems and leaders to make sure that they put in good people into those positions. I don't necessarily know how we do that, and I think that's probably more your day job role, Stuart, to kind of help influence that, I think. But the work that we do now around working with coaches, I think if you've got good people in decision-making positions, they allow you to crack on and do some pretty good stuff with the coaches, and then the coaches make the magic happen with the kids. And you just get this big spiral and snowball of some pretty great stuff going on. So yeah, it's been an interesting year with a lot going on, and trying to shape what we're all about, and have a really good view on what we're doing and why we're doing it, and how we're doing it. It's been really interesting. And then starting a project where we've probably spoken to 60 or 70 of the world's, I don't know if experts is the right word, but people with expertise, really good expertise.
Yeah, that's a better phrase, Nick, definitely.
Yeah. Speaking to 60 or 70 people of that ilk to help shape what we're doing, the outcome and the output of that kind of project will be a really strong piece of work that says, right, talent development environments, these are the things that you really need to have involved in them. Puts us in a really, really good position with some of the stuff that we're doing to be able to go to sports systems, pathways, coaches, and say, look, here's what some really good thinkers in the world are saying. You should probably consider this kind of stuff. And if sports then turn around and go, well, we believe in something entirely different, that's fine. You crack on. I'd love to know who they're who's informing those decisions, because I don't think there'd be many experts within the world, or people with expertise in the world, that we haven't spoken to that are really kind of influencing systems. So that's a really rambling way of not saying very much, I think, other than the fact that it's been an interesting year, and we're probably now, in terms of my day job stuff, on the way to doing some pretty interesting work with coaches and coach developers and systems, I think.
it's interesting, and I'd be interested to get your thoughts on this as well, Rusty. But I've had some really interesting experiences with leadership in my career.
What does interesting mean? Stuart, interesting is a crap word. What does it mean? What are you really trying to say?
It means terrible. It means terrible.
I'll expand on it. Don't worry. I reckon I've been, in my career, 20-odd year career, I reckon I can count on one hand how many people I can say were really good leaders. And one of the things I've noticed is that for some reason, organizations, I believe, have a perception of a good leader that is the absolute opposite of a good leader in the eyes of the person being led. Sorry, mate, go on.
What do you think their perceptions are? Give me the top 5 things those organisations think good leadership is.
Okay, strong, clear-minded, and very, very, very clear idea of what they want to achieve. Very procedural, very clear on procedure and process and structure. They are, what's the other word I was looking for? Have quite powerful personalities, forceful personalities that are alluring, I guess. And then the fifth element is that they are prepared to be tough when they need to be. So they have a toughness.
I've noticed they quite like hierarchies as well.
And hierarchy, yeah, that's a good example. Yeah.
And they quite like spreadsheets and recording stuff and talking about activity rather than effectiveness, and thinking often short-term rather than long-term.
Yeah.
And that all the stuff like caring and love is pink and fluffy.
Yeah, all the people bit, that's all just pink and fluffy. It's about the numbers, hitting the targets, achieving the goals, whatever it is. And that's deemed to be good leadership. And I've seen it everywhere. And it's very odd.
I've now got, I reckon, a pretty clear view in my own head of... So I manage, there's a team of 6. I reckon I've got a pretty clear view of how I want to do that with those guys now. So I think we've managed to simplify it down to... you want people to be empowered and crack on and do some really good stuff and think about things themselves, right? In the same way that we would do in a coaching session. So we want to give them the control. But in order to give them the control, they need the competence and clarity. So are they good enough and have the skills to be able to do what they need to do? Are they clear about what we're trying to do? So we want to kind of get to the stage now with our team about making sure, right, we're all pretty awesome about our jobs and doing our jobs. We're really clear on what we're trying to achieve. Then I can let them crack on with it. That's ultimately, as simple as it gets.
Yeah, Project Oxygen is a good thing to look at. So Project Oxygen, classic Google question, do we need managers? We do if they have some of these behaviours, characteristic skills. Number one, most important one is being a good coach. So actually, if you're responsible for, I think they said, if it's more than 6 people, then you should be spending 80% of your time helping those people get better. And my observation is that not enough people near the top think of management or leadership as supporting, helping other people to get better. So I'm very fortunate. I get to work with Nick's quick Googling Project Oxygen.
No, I'm multitasking.
Nice. And my job's now self-selecting, so I don't have to sit with a coach and pretend he wants to get better and that he wants me to be there. And so I get to work with some pretty cool people, so Birmingham and hockey and Tyler Grange and cricket, and I get to hang with lots of people that think like that. So I've become very fortunate, really. And the other thing I've been thinking a lot about is how they hire. So I'll give you an example. So Tyler Grange, who I do a bit of stuff with now, don't do interviews. I mean, interviews would have lots of tradition. Why do they have to wear a suit? Why are we interviewing them? Why doesn't either party bring photos that bring to life why they think they should, So there's lots of different ways of interviewing, and TG are doing some cool stuff with that. but NGBs just seem to do what they've always done. And, maybe you just go and get someone completely independent to select the people that get interviewed. There's also a worrying trend in sport of not even advertising jobs in leadership positions, which is like, wow, that's... So you don't want to know what's out there.
Yeah.
Do you know what? One of my... we were talking about it this week. One of my proudest moments this year is one of the new members of our team, a girl called Jenny, and the interview process that we went through to recruit her. Well, I say an interview process. It wasn't really an interview process. It was getting a load of people to share some stuff, and we kind of went, right, well, this is the kind of person we're looking for. So they'd done some video stuff as part of the before we even got to the shortlisting process. They talked about how they would develop people, what their thoughts were, what the models they used were. And again, we was like, right, there's no way of doing it. You just send us the 2 to 3 minute video clip. We had one bloke that walked around a national stadium around the bottom, and he pinned flip charts to the wall. Awesome. We've got one guy that did it as he was driving. Not so health and safety conscious. But fine. We had some bloke that just chatted. There was some bloke who had it filmed and he talked about stuff so we're looking at creativity and different ways of doing stuff. And then when it came to the kind of the day, it was just a load of different tasks where they worked together, where they did stuff in different ways. They had to do real life coach developing of real problems, of real stuff that would happen in their jobs, not sit down and, can you tell us about a time where you've had to deal with conflict? No, can you sit down with this coach and help him get better in half hour? Because that's what's going to happen in the real world. And out of it, we've ended up with a member of staff who is pretty cool. And they're looking at, we looked at the knowledge, skills and behaviours in a real different way. But one of the best examples I've seen of that this year is a nursery looking to recruit a new member of nursery staff. And typically, they're I don't know your experiences having kids, of taking your kids to nursery, but they're all girls. And what they wanted to try and do was get away from, you need a level 2 in this, or you need a BTEC in this, or you need a GCSE in this. And a lot of the kind of the words on the on what they were looking for was, do you have the skills to read a story where you're going to get interrupted 15 times in one sentence to ask something that's nothing to do with the actual story that you're reading? Do you have the patience to deal with that kind of moment? And what they did was they talked about the reality of working with 2 and 3 year old kids and just said, can you do that as a job? Do you fancy that? Not just, well, you need a level 2 in this, and and again, it was a pretty decent way of starting to look at stuff. So we did that, and it was a really cool way that I think that we've done in the end now of getting somebody that's going to be really good at helping coaches.
So advertising based on the type of on the way the role would, and actually mapping the selection process through the almost trying to mirror it against how the role would be.
Well, absolutely, because that's the kind of thing we were pointing them for, isn't it?
Who knew? Who knew that would be a good idea?
Well, I don't know, but it seems to have worked for us at the moment. And I guarantee there's no causal link between that and n=1 sample. I get that, but so far I'm on 100% hit rate.
I've seen quite a few coaches to spend time with primary school teachers, because I think they're rock stars. Because they're doing exactly what you say. Your coaching session's been interrupted. The primary school teachers are just experts at just handling chaos and just actually. Yeah, it's a good related world for coaching.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So Peter's joined us. I don't know where he is. He's got some sort of interesting Swedish sign behind him. He's decided to take his video off, probably, I imagine. He didn't like the look of it. How are you, Peter?
I'm good, thank you. But I'm even better without video, actually.
I was going to ask you where you were.
Yeah, well, I'm in dark, cold Stockholm, so you don't want to see that.
Rusty, Nick, have you met Peter before, or just?
I don't think I have. But
Okay.
Stuart, I have, because you were drunk when you introduced me to him.
Oh, that's true. We were at the Coaching Awards, weren't we?
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
I remember, but you don't.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That was a busy night. It was a busy night, Nick. So, Rusty, this is Peter Matson, who I had the privilege of working for. So, Peter, just before you came on, I'll embarrass you. Just before we came on, we were talking about leadership, and I was talking about how in my career I think I've been led well about 4 or 5 times in my career. And definitely the time I spent working for you, 5 years, trying to, I guess, enhance, improve, modernize the talent system in English golf was definitely some of the best times. And actually a lot of that was from the point of view of you just going, right, get on, make it happen, and giving me the space to do it.
Yeah, well, thank you. I do think that is one of the both challenges and I guess tricks of leadership, giving people the space to allow them to actually do what they're good at and not getting in their way. With
unnecessary procedures, with all the stuff we call management.
You can say that again. Yes.
Definitely. So anyway, we've just been sort of sharing some of our thoughts and reflections over the year and this, that and the other. And I just wondered whether, 2018, for a fairly busy year, I guess, for you. I know you've got various things you're planning and working on, but any big reflections or takeaways?
Yeah, well, I thought about that question because I knew you'd be asking it. And I think where I am now compared to, I guess, where I was when you and I worked together, I've gone from, in a way, coaching individuals or teams of individuals to trying to coach organizations, which is an interesting move. And I obviously today work for the Swedish Sports Confederation. I manage a number of people internally in 3 departments, but all in all those departments are there for one reason, and that reason is to support other organizations, our member organizations, the sport federations, and the support is there to both support them to grow their sport, develop their grassroots, anything from sort of sport for kids to sport for everyone pretty much, and also to help them excel in terms of whether it's Olympic medals or Paralympic medals or World Championships. And I think there's certainly some similarities when it comes to coaching, whether it's individuals or organizations, but there's also some differences. And what you just said, I think is one of them, sort of not being kind of tempted to be too complicated. I think a lot of what we try to do is based around sort of having those organizations work on their development plans, their high performance plans and so forth. And it's quite often easy to be sort of very ambitious in those plans. So you want to put everything in a plan. You've sort of got these great questions, and all of those questions just have to go into the template that the organization is to work with. And some of that will be really good, and some of it will be just sort of too much. And I think that's an interesting balance to try and strike.
So not like we've just been talking about planning, funnily enough, and not overly constraining through and then reducing the opportunity for people to have those kind of moments of epiphany where they go, actually, you know what we've discovered, that actually what we had planned isn't quite what we thought, and actually we've got to move in a new direction. Because the danger is that you end up with people sticking on the course when actually everything's telling them that they should change course.
And I think that probably goes for organizations as well as individuals. I've seen that with individuals on the golf course as well, that here's my plan, here's what I need to do, and I'm sticking to it sort of until doomsday, but I'm not paying enough attention to where that plan is actually taking me. Am I improving? Am I constantly getting better? And that question should be asked sort of no matter if you're an individual or an organization trying to improve.
And the skill, I think, here in terms of planning for me is being intuitive enough to understand when the deviation needs to take place and what that might need to look like. And you have to be very, I guess, skillful and aware, hyper aware of what's happening in your space in order to be able to make informed decisions about what next course of action might be required.
And you need to be quite innovative, I think. You need to be sort of open-minded enough to dare to try new things, and at the same time not being able to or willing to stick to something that sort of hasn't yet shown any signs of sort of effect on what you're trying to accomplish. So it's a delicate balance, I think, to strike between sort of trying new things and sticking to what you're actually trying.
Yeah. Any reflections on that, guys?
I remember asking a question to a World Championship canoer who was, I said, how do you reflect on training? And she said, how close do we stick to the plan? What do the best canoers in the world do? And she said, they adapt. I would be thinking, that clearly you would want, in all sports, you would want skillful, adaptable players. You would definitely want skillful, adaptable coaches. And despite your evidence, Stuart, you would want skillful, adaptable leaders.
No, why don't we spend a lot more time developing adaptable learners and performers, or adaptable learners that can become adaptable performers? Why is that not up there high on the agenda within coaching?
Because it's hard.
Dan Abrams, welcome.
Hi guys.
I thought I'd best introduce you before you chip in. Go on, because it's hard. So tell us more.
Dan, I'm loving the Christmas homeless man look. It's a strong one.
This is my everyday look.
I love it.
This is why my working from home look. So when you saw me on Skype the other week, Nick, I'd had my makeup on, I had my hair booth on. Whereas this is. Yeah, this isn't so good. Oh wow! Sort of a baptism of fire. I've stepped into some really challenging questions here. Thanks so much, guys. Why is it hard? Because I think mental flexibility is one of the toughest things. I mean, it's a real higher cognitive function, isn't it? To have the capacity. I mean, I just caught the tail end of Peter there talking from a golfing perspective, and working with a number of clients who are operating out on, say, the European or the US tour. It's having the capacity to step back, having a plan and having the capacity to step back and ask yourself, okay, is what I'm doing effective here? It is tough because, how long do you keep doing it? It's almost an impossible thing to answer. Again, I'm just coming from a golf perspective. Do you keep going? Do you keep going? Do you keep going? I always hear this quote: the definition of madness is doing something time and again and expecting a different result. But sometimes you've got to keep doing the same things to keep improving and to keep going to where you want to go. Whereas obviously there's other times where you've got to say stop. I think for me, as I was listening to Peter, again, I just jumped on the line here, but as Peter was talking, I was just thinking about communication, the importance of communication. So from an individual sport perspective, that's the communication between the player, his or her caddy, and myself as sports psych or with the coach, and my communication with that player's coach. From an organisation perspective, it's inter and intra-departmental conversations. It's conversations with your players. As from a coaching perspective, let's go straight into the player-led stuff. It's having a conversation with the player. What do you think? How do you think this is going? Do you think this is going to eventually help you get to where you want to go, before making any judgment on that? Pivoting is a bold move, and it's that mental flexibility is tough. It's really difficult.
But do you not think, though, that I think it's tough if you've already set out that there's a clear goal and method and approach and everything else at the start. If you leave space, I tried to convince people in the production of plans, strategies, like national policy documents almost, to say we deliberately need to keep space in here because we know where we want to get to and we know what a desired end state might look like, or we have an idea of that. And the reason for that is because people have said this would be a great desired end state. And we know also some things we might need to embark on in order to start on that journey, and that they're also things that we might want to do. They're approaches that we might want to take, key areas of focus. What we don't know and what we're not going to pretend to know is everything about the how of that, everything about how we might achieve that, because we deliberately want to try and keep that space open to give us the opportunity to be exploratory and have some discoveries. And part of the reason for that is it's arrogant to think that we know. We know something, but we don't know it all. So I have written national policy documents with great big hole in the middle, and it was very, very difficult to get leaders to go with that. Their view was, this is light on detail. Why aren't you telling us how you're going to do it? How don't you know? Why don't you know what you're going to do? And my argument was, well, firstly, we don't have enough information. Secondly, I don't know we ever will. So what we need to do is to be flexible enough to learn as we go. Learn, continuously measure, track, monitor progress, feel how we're going, and then we can then make judgments as we move, like this iterative learning approach. Before anybody else just jumps in on this, welcome to David Hinchliffe, who is rocking the Christmas hobo beard. Thank you, David. You're looking fabulous over there. I like the way you've done that.
Oh, I can make it better. Hang on. I can make it better.
Oh, yes. There you go. The Santa hat is with it as well. That's awesome.
Now we're ready.
And Phil Carney, how are you?
Very good. Now, how are you all doing?
Excellent. Nice to see you both in your car like I am, whereas everybody else happens to be. Rusty's basically on his chaise longue. Chilled out. Nick is lovely. In his what I assume to be his home office. Dan we're working from home, and Peter is, I guess, probably waiting for a flight. Knowing you, Peter.
Out shopping.
What
a
yes.
nightmare, isn't it? It's Friday dinner waiting to make it to the dinner table. Just need to pick it up from the shop first.
Well, you're all welcome to my little Christmas party. And David's won the prize for the most Christmassy attire. So well played, David. You've probably just come in on the end of us talking about, we're actually talking a little bit about leadership planning. We're talking about, even just learning spaces and creating and designing learning spaces, and why there's so many leaders and so many organizations who seem to feel that really structured and prescriptive plans are a means by which to achieve our goals, and we feel something different, and we're just interested to just reflect on that. But before we delve further into that, I'm going to ask each of you, because Dan's just arrived, David and Phil have just arrived. We've been talking about our annual reflections. So Dan, seeing as you were here first, any moments of clarity that you've had this year, or any areas of reflection that you think are worthy of sharing?
I don't know if they're worthy of having a massive conversation about them. I wouldn't be so bold as to say that. But I suppose a few things this year. I think, obviously, I'm a sports psychologist, so I'm going to come very much from the sports psych perspective. But I think three things for me this year. I think, number one, it's easier to normalize mental skills in an environment by helping that environment accept vulnerability. That's become much more, I would never have said that 5 or 6 years ago, but my understanding of human functioning within sporting environments is it's vital to accept vulnerability as an everyday thing on and off the pitch and the court and the course. I think that volume of that noise has been turned up for me dramatically, having worked at various levels. Number two, if you want me to go on, I'd say servant leadership, the importance of that as an optimal style of leadership.
How do you describe servant leadership? What is your understanding of it?
Well, I'm extraordinarily biased because at the moment I'm trying to semantically, linguistically frame that with reference to my psychosocial model, because I'm a shameless marketeer. However, I would say, just from a very basic perspective, being player led. I know that sounds really cheesy to say, but experiences I'm having, just had over the summer, I'm having now at the elite level, just the importance of asking the questions, empowering players to find solutions. And I know that's is well trodden, but I just think we can all get so much better at doing that, because we're at times so keen to jump on the I know the answer, I know the solutions. So I think that's just a big one for me personally. And I'll give you a final one very, very quickly, and it will not necessarily be particularly in keeping with the talent equation, but players absolutely, certainly at the elite level, players need to have a structure to their mindset. I'm sorry, I absolutely vehemently believe that players at the very elite level, at least at the very elite level, for them to optimize their ability to high perform more consistently under pressure, absolutely need to have a structure. And when they don't, they will not be the best that they can be. And I'm talking about elite level. So obviously that's where I mostly function. So that's me. That's my feedback for the year.
Epiphanies. So when you say a structure,
yeah.
I assume what you mean by that is that there is some kind of, I guess, mental framework or architecture within which the individual operates, or something along those lines. Is that what you're thinking?
I kind of lost you there, Stu, but when you said framework, absolutely. So I think it's really, really important. And again, this is part of normalizing any coaching culture. Just giving players a bit of a framework, and then helping them fit their own personality characteristics and specific mental skills needs into that framework. So they need a skeleton. And then helping them as individuals find the best way for them to get the most from that framework. But hey, look, as I say, I'm a sports psychologist, so I'm deep in that stuff. You know, as a coach, that's very relevant to you, but perhaps it's more surface level stuff for you guys as coaches. Maybe, I don't know. I don't want to say the wrong thing here, but I'm really deep in, the sports psych world. So my job is to help players have a structure to their mindset. And the more I work at the elite level, the more I believe that that's vital. So having that framework, as you allude to.
Yeah, and I think it's important for me the reason I distinguish between those things is because I think it's important to talk about kind of a framework or an architecture, more so than, say, a structure, because a structure evokes the idea of procedural, it evokes the idea of inflexibility, whereas with something like a framework or a scaffold or something along those lines, there's still scope for that to evolve, emerge, and there's still opportunities within a framework for various things to take shape. So that was just what my little just thoughts around that idea. But I wouldn't. That's a separate podcast that we can jump on another time, Dan. I'd be interested to explore that with you.
Fair enough.
David, what's been going on in your world, and what are your kind of key reflections on the year?
Before I say that, just to say about the idea of the framework and the structure. What I always think of that analogy that you told me. I'm not sure who you got it from, but about the opening and the closing of the gates.
Yeah.
And if you've got gates, then you've got space to run around, in the fields between the gates. But if you build too much structure around it, all you've got is just straight lines for people to go in, and they can't. They're too restricted.
Yeah,
so it's a certain amount of restriction, but not so much that you can't do anything except the one thing that is prescribed.
And then you can choose how many of those gates should be open, how many of those gates should be closed in the different field. The fields of affordances, I call that, which I got from Keith Davids at Phil and Ed and Ollie's conference. The fields of affordances, open and close the gates, and then you can be more. You can have more possibilities for action open and less possibilities for action open. Did a session like that with Southampton Academy recently, where we closed a lot of the gates. I think they were quite surprised that I'd closed so many of the gates off, but we were working in a particular space, and that was the nature of the work. Anyway, sorry, go on. Yeah, I interrupted you.
I think the big thing for me this year has been how I've moved away from sort of raw data, if you like,